I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Welcome back to 5-Star Counsel. This week, we're talking with Emily Albrecht, a senior associate at Gardner, Trabulsi & Associates. Emily's developed a niche practice that I'll let her explain. It's interesting, and I'm not doing it any justice by stumbling through it here. I had Emily on because part of delivering better client service is focusing your practice on a specific niche. Emily has done just that, and we'll talk about how she developed her niche and the benefits that have come from having that focused practice. Let's get to the interview. Hey 5-Star listeners, before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Hey, Emily, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you. We got introduced by Jordan Couch, previous guest on this podcast, about a year ago on Instagram, only because he was like, you probably want to follow my friend Emily.
You like weird stuff? Follow her.
To share a family secret, yeah, a bunch. And so it just kind of went from there. But what Jordan ended up telling me at some point between then and, well, a few weeks ago when we started scheduling this was you've got a really neat focus for your legal practice where I'm not going to attempt to describe it. I'm going to let you do it because you'll do a much better job.
Yeah, so the way I usually describe it is just, funeral law or like mortuary litigation. In general, I do defense litigation, a lot of insurance defense, and that's ultimately how I got led into, the specific field of funeral law. But yeah, that's big picture. That's what I would call it.
You're involved with funeral homes and related industries whenever somebody gets mad or they get mad at them.
Right. So I work with funeral homes, funeral directors, embalmers, cemeteries, crematories, anything under that large umbrella of the death care industry.
Got it. Death care industry. I think I've seen that once before, and that might have been reading Reclaiming the American Way of Death. Mm-hmm. But that is all pretext to, well, why are we talking to you on this client service podcast? And the reason is the way we deliver better client service ultimately is being focused on our practice. And so we're going to be talking about, like, how did you fall into this? What does it look like for you? And, one of the big fears is when I talk to people, and when I know I've heard this before, is just, well, if I get too niche down, nobody's ever going to call me and I'll run out of business and die penniless and broke.
Mm-hmm. So, I won't. The good news is, if you want to get dark about it, people are always going to be dying. So right. The funeral industry is unique in that it's, it's there. It's not going anywhere. And, again, I know it's like super dark, but with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, like the funeral industry is unfortunately booming right now. So no one wants to have that happen, but it's just one of those things that, I guess we as a society generally don't think about it. But I appreciate the concerns that people do have about getting too, specific with your focus areas. But it's just kind of my own little death care world where there's all different kinds of opportunities. It's like a different universe.
Right. From my side, my practice focuses on estate planning, so I'm dealing with it before yours.
You're dealing with it too, yeah.
Right.
Pre-death.
pre-death, but people
And
are
sometimes
still,
post-death.
oh, definitely, but people are rarely motivated to get it done. Like we filter out clients who aren't clearly motivated to get this done now, only because if they're not doing it for a reason, if they don't have that motivation, they're not going to get to the end of the line with us and our work, and that
Mm,
doesn't serve them or us
right,
to spend our time chasing them.
right.
But so what I heard earlier to go back to was like you're not concerned about the focus because ultimately you're seeing more and more opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And it just our two fields are very intertwined. And often we kind of talked about this, we were chatting earlier about the importance of recognizing things that we are not capable of doing as attorneys. And I get people asking me all the time, like, can you do my will? And I'm just like, okay, no. Like, I'll find you someone who's good. Like, could I technically sit down and pull out an old textbook and try to figure out how to write a will for you? I guess, but no, like the importance to me of admitting to clients, things that are beyond my scope. And I think clients appreciate that. But a lot of times, funeral directors, especially, they'll be like 70 years old and they'll call me and they'll be like, hey, I think it's time to do my will. And I'm like, first of all, how do you not have a will? You're 70 and you're a funeral director and you deal with this every day. But yeah, I want the best for my clients. And so I do everything that I can within, my purview. And then if and when things come up that, I wouldn't want to handle, quite frankly, because I know that I shouldn't, then I refer it to other people. And I also get business the same way. I have a lot of referrals that come from folks who, do a lot of transactional work, or they just work with some funeral homes, or maybe like one or two, just in the business aspect of things. And then, when something does happen and they're concerned about liability or litigation, then they'll call me. And it's the same, just like I'll call an estate lawyer. They'll call me and be like, hey, I've taken this as far as I feel comfortable doing. I know that you have, a lot more experience in this area. So can I, send my client to you? And I'm always like, yeah, of course.
Right, because it makes it easier for you to get involved with another lawyer. There's less
Totally.
threat of you taking their client, because if you're only looking at the death care side of it, you're not going to be taking their other insurance litigation. You're not going to be taking, the wills and estates practice, whatever it may be.
And like, I'm not going to be helping them, with their taxes or anything. Like, I can barely do my own taxes. That's another thing. It's like, I think it's important, a lot of times folks do kind of are apprehensive about referring business, especially with an ongoing client, because they're scared, like, what if I lose this client, or like, who do I send them to? Or, I think it's important for us as a legal community to work together and have, a network wherein we can provide our clients with the best service ourselves, and then have folks that we trust and we know are, excellent attorneys handle the things that we can't. But all around, like, you want your client to have, the best legal services that they can.
Right. I can, if I wanted to, as a tax lawyer, do 1040s for people. I don't even do
Right.
my own, because I want the folks who know how to do it to
That's a good tax lawyer, being like, call your accountant.
call your accountant. They're good at it. There are
Yeah.
times where it makes sense for me to do it, but I haven't done my own tax return since I started working, because in part, I know the accountants are better at it, but also I have taken some chances on tax returns and taken some positions where I want the outside expert who, to come and take a look at what I've done before I just, practice on myself.
Absolutely.
And what I've seen is you're ending up developing better referral sources, because
Oh yeah.
you end up working with other people. Like I send plenty of work to CPAs. They send more work back to me because they know I'm not going to take things from them. I'm
Right.
not the lawyer who wants to do that. What sort of referral relationships do you end up getting into?
So I've had several different types. The most recent one I had was somebody, he sent me. like I said, a lot of attorneys that, do more of the business side of things, working with funeral homes. A few years ago, an issue came up with one of the funeral homes he works with, and I think he just Googled me and like organically found me and called me. But it ended up being, a really good client for me. It's still a really good client for him. We both continue to work with that client in different capacities to this day. And then a couple of months ago, the same attorney, which I'd changed firms since then. I don't even know how he found me, but he called me at my new firm and was like, hey, I haven't, I referred that last client to you. My client, who I still, communicate with, was really satisfied with your help. So I'm going to, send you another client. This is a totally different situation. It's more transactional, but it was like a friendly deal between, a lot of times parents will sell funeral homes to children. So he was like, I will work with you. I'm representing the parents. Obviously, I can't represent everyone. Like, would you be interested? And that's something that I'd not done before, but I felt comfortable doing it, after doing a little research and, knowing that I trust him. He's an excellent attorney. Like, we'd work through it together. So that was a really cool experience. And then, we still both ultimately keep the same client, and whenever they're going to need business help, they're going to call him, and if something goes wrong, if and when, then they'll call me. So yeah, those kind of relationships are really important. And I appreciate so much when people refer business to me, because I know personally I wouldn't refer business to anyone that I wouldn't go to myself. So sometimes it's like, oh, I know a guy that like does that stuff. Like, yeah, I'll give you his number. But like, unless you actually, are close with that attorney and you really are confident in their abilities, I think that sometimes, referrals gone bad, that can ultimately cost you your own client if they, because they're trusting us with like the utmost trust. So I think that, those referrals are really important, but also not just doing it like, oh, my friend from law school or whatever. Like, as much as I like my friends from law school, like some of them I don't know very much about their practice, or I don't really know, just because they do X type of law. I don't know if they're, if it's not someone I would go to, I wouldn't refer a client to them.
Right. It's also harder to remember to send, generic piece of work to generic lawyer. If you don't know why to pick up the phone and call somebody,
right,
you're not going to remember them, and it makes it that much harder.
I was also going to say, I do get calls sometimes where people are like, hey, I have this client, it's funeral home or funeral industry related. This thing's going on. Like, I don't know, should I handle it? I'm like, not sure what to do. And then I just am like, oh, no, you got this. And just walk them through. It's something that's like, you don't need to hire me for this. Like, it's, let me give you some background and just kind of explain to you how this works within the industry. And then, I think that's important too, just as important as telling a client, like, I don't know how to do this stuff, so I'm going to send it to someone else. Telling someone who's calling you, being like, no, you got this. Like, I can give you some guidance. I'm not going to, like, I think that builds the kind of relationships wherein, later on down the line, there will be a time when they won't be able to do it. And then they'll call me and they'll remember that, that I helped that way.
Right. Because when you can help them look good in front of whoever it is,
right?
Oh, congratulations. I get to, other lawyer gets to keep helping their client to stay in a relationship they're already in and comfortable with, but you get to be the silent helper that, you've helped them look good. That obviously just helps everybody out.
Yeah. And I mean, because my practice area is so niche, like I get calls from all different kinds of people. Like I have clients throughout the country for a number of reasons without getting too much into the technical aspect. But the funeral industry is regulated not only on the state and like municipal level, but federally. The Federal Trade Commission has a rule called the Funeral Rule. Really original with that title. So yeah, that's something that I can help folks with, in any state. And then a lot of my practice also over time has evolved into more of a consulting capacity. So I get people calling me from all across the country, which is really fun and interesting. And I get calls though from all different kinds of people. Like maybe like a year ago, I got just a random call to answer, and it was like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm a mediator and you don't know me, but I found an article that you wrote, and I'm trying to mediate this like funeral industry case. And to be quite honest, I have no idea what this case is worth. Can I just like bounce it off of you? Because the parties are really far apart and I just like don't know what to do.
Interesting.
And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, take 10, 15 minutes to talk to that person. And I didn't get another call. So I'm hoping that they settled.
It worked.
Yeah, but just stuff like that. And it also entails being willing and able to, have the bandwidth to take calls like that aren't necessarily going to turn into business. I also am like general counsel for the Washington State Funeral Directors Association. So as, benefit to their members, they offer me in general, like you can call her anytime. So I get every day I get calls with questions, and it's a great thing for them to make accessible to their membership, and it helps me be closer within the death care industry, especially on the local level. But yeah, it's not necessarily something where every time you get a phone call, it's going to turn into business. And I know that some people, like, that's what they need for the scope of their practice and their business model. It's just a lot of calls about whatever. But I don't mind it. I love it.
No, because what I'm hearing is that you've gotten opportunities from the focus. There's no way they were the Washington State Funeral Directors Association. I think I got that right. And if I didn't, close enough.
It's a mouthful.
I mean, they weren't going to call anybody just randomly. They weren't going to start at your last name starts with an A, so they may have started with the A's, but they weren't, if they'd started with A's, there was probably A.A. Aronson who could have been in there, and they weren't doing that. They needed somebody who knew the issues and had seen enough of them. And likewise, the people who call you for consulting, they're not calling somebody who's randomly there on the other end. They need somebody who knows what to look for and can save them the time of, can you boil this down for 15 minutes?
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Like I said, my practice has evolved over the years. I didn't really know exactly what it was going to look like. I mean, I don't know what it'll look like in 10 years from now, but I've found ways to, again, there are, in a certain capacity, I offer advice and answer questions for folks it's not monetized whatsoever. But then over the years, over time, different types of clients that I was getting and what they were coming to me looking for, that did monetize itself into that consulting capacity. But the Washington State Funeral Directors Association, I formed a relationship with them like many years ago. I think it was like 2015 or 16. And when I just reached out to them and I was like, hey, can I become a member of this? Like, I'd love to come to your conventions and your meetings and just get involved. And they were like, of course, we would love that. You're a lawyer? What? We used to have a lawyer for like 50 years and he died and we don't even have a lawyer. And I was like, awesome. Not that he died, but this is a cool opportunity, right? But I was just coming into it, just meeting them. And I was still, learning about the industry and like in the beginning of my journey. So it took several years of just being ingrained within that organization and also like on the national level, national organizations before I formalized my relationship with them as being their general counsel. So something like that is, you're right, they're not just going to go through the phone book. Do they even have phone books anymore? But and call like AA, whatever. And, it's fortunate that I did reach out when I did, because knowing what I know now and having done all the work that I've done for them, the fact that they went several years without having a general counsel, like that's not something that you want anybody to do with that structure of an organization. So I feel really fortunate to have had that opportunity and kind of the luck where I just fell into it.
No, and the selfish thing for you is they've hired you. It's basically secured you in this role in a way that probably makes you, it's easier to sleep at night knowing you've got that group that has hired you to take care of you.
Sure. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like I was saying earlier, I mean, not only do I serve as general counsel to the association, but they offer as a member to their benefit, or a benefit to their members, access to me, which then generates new business on an individual member level. So it's kind of like twofold in that way. But over the years, it's gotten to a point now where people just call me and they're like, hey, I'm having a problem. I asked around. They said that you're the one who knows about this stuff. Can you help me? Which is awesome, right? Because like, especially, earlier on in our careers when we're younger attorneys, like I would not be having this opportunity in other industries where there's like 100 different people you can call that know all about it. And they're like the old school guys that have been there forever and everyone knows them. And it's again, like referring something to someone that's beyond my bandwidth or beyond my purview. I get why people would want to call the expert that's been doing it for 50 years. I'd call that person if I
Right.
had them. But because that doesn't exist, even on the West Coast at all, there's very, very few attorneys in the country that do the kind of work I do. Like I can count them on one hand.
Really?
On the defense side, yes. Okay. And I definitely am the youngest one, but on the plaintiff side of things, there's many, dozens and dozens. But that's a whole different story. But yeah, it's been an interesting, like when I first got into it and I realized there weren't other people that were doing it, especially locally. There was one guy, it turns out, who their attorney was, who had been doing it in Seattle for like 50 years. And then he retired, moved to Florida and died. And it was just like something, I didn't even know that a hole in the market existed. And so when I did more research and realized like, if I do this, if I make this my thing, like it's going to be, I think it's going to pay off in the end because it's just such an easy opportunity for me to just jump into the hole in the market, and I'll have more of a chance of being able to establish myself simply based on the lack of competition, I guess.
Right.
But fortunately, it turned out well, and I'm good at what I do, and I love working with the industry that I work with. But yeah, it was just a really unique opportunity that I don't think I ever expected to find, and I don't think most attorneys would find in the first 10 years of their practice.
Right. And I mean, so with that member benefit, what you're also doing is it helps you to be the person they're calling, but you reinforce your status as the expert because you get to see more of the same problems again and again.
The same problems, and then also different problems. Like I am constantly learning, and this industry is just so interesting to me. Like sometimes I get calls and I'm just like, man, I never even thought that this was a possibility that this could happen. And they're like, I know, me either. So it's like, it's challenging. And we're working. There are some calls where I'm like, oh, I've dealt with this. Like, here's what we got to do. But then, yeah, there are other ones where I'm like, I don't even know like what to do, but we'll figure it out. And I welcome those opportunities. I think, I like the challenge, and sometimes I'm just learning along with my client to get to the best possible outcome.
Awesome. So you'd mentioned they're really only, I can't see your hands right now, but I'm assuming there are only 5 fingers on your hands when you said that you had, competitors on one hand. What is that like? I mean, it sounds then, or just piecing it back together for myself, you're doing the defense work.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for you? And how your interactions with your clients tend to be competitors, but they don't mind having you as the sole legal representative?
Sure. So the other folks that do the same type of work that I do, they're spread out throughout the country. So there's a few people in the Midwest, and then there's like one person that's on the East Coast. She's actually more of like a real estate attorney, but I know she's a teacher and she teaches a class on death care law. So yeah, we're really spread out. So I got like the whole West Coast to myself. Oh, and there's one person in Texas, I believe, too. But in terms of like what that looks like, it's kind of as, like I've built this relationship with my state funeral directors association. Those folks have too with their own state funeral directors associations. And then there's the 3 major national organizations within the industry. And a few of those folks then also become general counsel for the national organization. So ultimately, like life goals, that's the direction I'm trying to go into because it is a unique area, and the business is different than a lot of different types of practices because we can, as general counsel for those large associations that have sometimes tens of thousands of members, they're getting calls from all across the country as well. And so we're something to go into litigation. Of course, like I would have the option of finding local counsel to work with and being admitted pro hac vice. And it's a totally different type of universe. But there's very few of us that are all trying to manage it at the same time. And I have no idea what they thought when I just kind of like popped up out of nowhere. They were like, oh, somebody else.
Somebody new.
Yeah. And they kind of all fell into it the way that I did too. A couple of attorneys that do this type of work also had a background in funeral industry. They had been funeral directors, and then they went to law school. So I think it's awesome, but it's like kind of a different sort of perspective that they're offering, because I've not gone to mortuary school and I've not had personal experience within the industry. I think that I offer a different perspective as well. So yeah, and I'm sure someday they're going to retire and become experts and be super rich and have awesome lives. Yeah. No, it's cool. Everyone's different. They got their own thing. And it's an exciting opportunity for me to have like that growth later on in my career that I'm looking forward to. And yeah.
Emily, this has been great to hear about how you've built your focus practice. Where can our dear listeners find more about you and your practice?
So you can follow me on Instagram like you do, and that would be at Funeral Law Lady, or you can email me at funerallawlady@gmail.com. I have my website for my law firm, but my last name's so hard to spell, and the email address is kind of tedious. So it's easier to just hit me at the Funeral Law Lady, and then I'll point you in the right direction if we need to go further.
Excellent. Emily Albrecht, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.